There was a man living in Penllyn whose name was Teagat the Bald. Now Teagat had a wife called Ceridwen, and between them they had a son. And their son was the ugliest boy that anyone had ever seen. His parents called him Morran, but everyone else called him Avagdi, which means utter darkness, because of his hideous appearance. Now Ceridwen saw this, and it made her very sad, for she knew that her son would never have any success in life, unless he had some other qualities to offset his really amazing ugliness. Fortunately, she was a witch, and skilled in the 3 arts of magic, illusion, and divination. So she took herself to her books and studied how to solve this problem. Ceridwen read and thought and studied for a long time, and finding no way in which she could make her son handsome, she determined to make him wise. She had discovered a spell which would fill him with the power of prophetic inspiration, so that everyone would want to favor him regardless of his looks. Her method was this: to select and gather certain herbs on certain fortunate days and times, and place them all in a cauldron, which must be kept boiling for a year and a day. At the end of that time, 3 drops of liquid would leap out of the cauldron, and whoever caught and swallowed those 3 drops would become the most inspired and learned person in the world. But all the rest of the liquid left in the cauldron would be utter poison. Now, because she had to continue collecting and adding her herbs throughout the course of a year, Ceridwen needed help with this project. So she hired an old blind man called Morda to stir the cauldron and add water to it from time to time. And also she hired a young boy named Gwion to carry wood and keep the fire built up. Neither of these she thought would be able to understand the purpose of what they were doing, and thereby steal her secrets. And this arrangement left Ceridwen herself free to continue collecting and adding her herbs at the proper times. At last things were almost ready. Ceridwen took hold of his son Avagdi and stationed him close to the cauldron, ready to catch the 3 miraculous drops when their moment to leap forth arrived. Then she set herself down to rest and wait. And because it was a warm day, and the sound of the bubbling pot was soothing, and she was very tired, Ceridwen soon fell asleep. Now, it may have been by chance that little Gwion, in the course of his wood gathering and fire tending, somehow changed places with the Baghdad, and it may not have been. However that was, when the moment arrived and the 3 hot drops hopped out of the pot, it was not in Avagdi's open mouth they landed, but on Gwion's thumb. They burned like fire, and before he could think, he thrust his thumb in his mouth to ease the pain. And immediately he knew everything that there was to know. And foremost of his knowledge was that he had got what was meant for the witch's son, and that Ceridwen would destroy him for it. So he took to his heels and fled for his life. The cauldron uttered a cry and cracked from side to side, and the liquid left in it spilled out and ran down into a neighboring stream, where it poisoned the horses of Gwion, lord of that contrave. The uproar woke Ceridwen, who started up in alarm. As soon as she understood what had happened, she struck old Morda the blind man so hard that one of his eyes fell out, and if he had not been blind before that blow, he would have been thereafter. Then, with his cries and Avagdi's wails ringing in her ears, she set off after Gwion. Looking back over his shoulder, Gwion saw her coming after him, with her eyes flashing fire and her hair standing on end with rage, and he was afraid for his life. Drawing on the magic of the cauldron, he changed himself into a long-eared hare, in order to run the faster, and sped off across the fields ahead of her. But Ceridwen was not put off by this. She knew this game too well. Using her own magic, she changed herself into a black greyhound bitch, and came on after him, with her red tongue hanging out between her teeth, thirsty for Gwion's blood. looking back again, Gwion saw that she was gaining on him. Ahead of him was a little stream, and quick as thought he leapt into it, and there became a trout, swimming swiftly through its riffles, ready to find a deep pool where he could hide. But Ceridwen was not put off by this. She knew this game too well. Using her own magic, she became a brown otter and sprang after him into the stream, swimming swiftly in his wake, able to go wherever he could. Just as the otter's paws were about to close upon him, Gwion the trout leapt frantically into the air, and there became a wren. Instantly he fluttered off toward the nearest woods, looking for a hole in a tree where he could hide himself. But Ceridwen was not put off by this. She knew this game too well. Slipping swiftly out of the stream, she became a great brown hawk, and flew off after Gwion on swiftly beating wings. Seeing the hawk overtaking him, Gwion almost despaired. The woods were too far, and there was no place to hide. Any minute now, when the hawk stooped upon him, he would be nothing but a puff of feathers floating in the wind. But life was still strong in Gwion, and he was not ready to die. Seeing a threshing floor below him, covered with winnowed wheat, he dropped like a stone toward it, and became one grain among its thousands, thinking that now at last he would be safe. But Ceridwen was not put off by this. She knew this game too well. Dropping to the threshing floor in her turn, she became a black red-crested hen, with beady eyes and cruel claws and a sharp yellow beak. Pecking her way delicately through the piles of wheat, she found the grain that was Gwion, and plucked him out of his hiding place, and swallowed him down whole. And that should have been the end of Gwion Bach. But magic works strangely at times, and what is achieved is not always what was intended. Changing herself back into a woman again, with her revenge as she thought complete, Ceridwen realized that something was wrong. The grain of wheat in her belly had changed to a different kind of seed. She was pregnant with Gwion Bach. She carried him for 9 months, and then at last was delivered of him. She had been meaning to kill him as soon as he was born, but when she came to look at the child, he was so beautiful that she could neither bring herself to do him any harm nor let anyone else do it for her. Instead, she sewed him up in a leather bag and tossed it into the sea, for the winds and the waves to take him where they would. She, at least, was done with him. Now, Gwyth Garan here the poisoned horses, had a fishing weir at the mouth of the river Dovey near Aberystwyth, from which he was accustomed to take every May Eve as many as 300 salmon. And Gwyth had one son, a hapless fellow named Elfin, who never had anything but ill luck in his life. You know the type. Therefore his father had told him that on this particular May Eve he might have everything that he could find in the weir. So when the night arrived, Elfin went to the weir with some of his father's fishermen, and they set up their nets, and they watched the weir from the high tide to the low. Then they went to see what they had caught. But when they came within the weir, which on this night was usually full of young salmon, they saw not so much as the head nor the tail of a single fish, but only some dark something left on the weir by the tide. One of the fishermen pointed this out to Elfin, and out of curiosity he took it down and slit it open with his knife, revealing the white forehead of a young child. As soon as he saw this, he exclaimed, "Wille, Taliesin!" What a shining brow! To these words the child replied, "Taliesin Byd," accepting the name and all that it implied. For the word tal means forehead, but also of value or payment. Then Elfin took the child and set him on his saddle-bow and carried him home to his wife, who raised him tenderly and lovingly. And from that moment Elfin's luck improved. And the child in the weir, who had been Gwion Bach, and now was Taliesin, became in time the greatest poet and diviner that the world has ever seen, and repaid Elfin 300-fold for his care. But that is a story for another day.